Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives in Religion. My name is the Reverend Wayne Purcell, and as always, I greet you in the African tradition of Hotep. Peace be unto you. Perhaps you already heard about the incident that took place about a week and a half ago, and it saddens me that our young people maliciously take each other's lives as if they're totally indispensable. There was a young boy walking home from school in the midst of a turf argument or gang situation, something of that nature. And while this young boy is walking home from school, who happens to be to my understanding, a pretty good student, somewhere around an A student, had prospects for college. He's walking home while these guys is out here fighting and carrying on and arguing and what have you about one thing or another. And for no reason, a couple young brothers jumped on this brother and beat him with a club until he lay there motionless. When they took him to the hospital, he was DOA, dead on arrival. 16 years old. Now, I don't know about you, but that really bothers me. It disturbs me to see the way young people are behaving when it comes to the lives of others. It disturbs me and it pains me that we as an oppressed people who came over here in shackles and chains, whose parents struggled, who struggle has been a way of life for the African American. Oh yes, some of us, get ahead, and some of us move up in life, but not without a struggle. A struggle that is certainly unwarranted, but is met because of the color of one's skin. And these young brothers who don't want to go to school, who've decided they weren't going to do anything with their life other than sell drugs and run the streets, took the life of this young brother because he was an A student. And I read somewhere, and I think it's Carter G. Woodson's, where he states the miseducation of the Negro, and he stated the fact that we are the only race of people that equate intelligence to our oppressor, those who enslaved us. And so we demean one another by saying you're trying to act white by advancing yourself in life, by gaining some intelligence, by becoming an A student, by being serious about your life and about your education. We have young brothers and sisters out here saying to one another, look, he think he white, or she think he white. And this is the truth, because and we still do this today to young men and young women who aspire for something other than, get caught up in this vicious cycle of ours where we live in poverty. But this young boy at 16 years old, these kids don't understand life. What do they understand? They don't know nothing about life. As we used to say, they don't know nothing from Jack. And to take the life of another young brother for the only reason because he was an A student and he did not run with the crowd, and because of that, I guess he thought he was better than, because that's the attitude that we get against those who just don't hang. That's not their flow. So they don't want to deal in that. And their temperament is such that they're not the violent type. And so we make mockery of them. We give them a difficult time in life. And when I say we, I'm talking about young kids. And those of us who were in school, you understand and know exactly what I'm talking about. For so many times when we were coming up, there were young kids in our class who were intelligent because their mom, dads, whomever made sure they did their homework every night, perhaps read to them when they were babies, and took a serious interest in the education of their child, so that by the time they got into grade school and matriculated through school, they were a notch above those of us who spent our time watching television. The Three Stooges and stuff, and cartoons, or running the streets, or simply playing ball with our time, instead of taking the time to learn. So this young boy who took time to learn and wanted to better himself and saw his future as such that he would one day be in college, his life was snuffed out by his own peers, his own brothers and sisters. And this is on the level of 16-year-olds. These things go on right on through life. Even today in our communities, we as adults, we do the same thing. We do a different type of killing. We do a different type of lynching. We do a different type of taking one another's lives by refusing to accept those who get outside of the norm, by refusing to do business with one another, that by failing to realize the value of having black businesses in our community, failing to realize the importance of supporting one another. We fail to realize this. Now, we go to church, and that's the only thing we do together, and we really don't do that together, truth be told, because church is nothing more than a social event. We're not dealing on the spiritual plane as it relates to church. So not even there are we really together. That's why the ministers have to plead and beg and borrow to get people to pay them whatever they supposed to pay. And so we should be appalled when we see things like this and recognize what our young generation has become, has degenerated to the point that we take the life of a person by beating them unconscious. Now, what kind of anger and hate can a young boy have towards another young boy who's not even involved in gangs, who did nothing to his family, who didn't take the life of someone else, but just a young educated school kid, 16 years old, going home from school, and he's met with his own brothers who look like him, who talk like him, who are oppressed just like him, and beat down to the ground and continuously beat this young boy. And if you read what the paper said, and you can only take so much what the paper says, although they like to jump on top of stuff like this when they see the violence that we perpetuate against one another, they love to write about that, and then they sit back and say, see, look at them, look how they act. They don't even love themselves. And it's true, you can't love yourself if you hate your brother who looks like you, your brother, whose history is the same as yours. And if you hate him for no other reason than the color of his skin and the texture of his hair, the same color skin you have and the same texture hair that you have, and you hate him for that, or dislike him for that, you hate yourself. And the thing about it, my beloved, is that, see, this is part of the process of knowing ourselves, because we've been taught to hate ourselves. We've been taught from the very beginning, from the time of when we came on the shores of Jonestown, we were taught to hate ourselves. Now, if you go back to our African heritage and the tradition of the African, he was taught to love himself. This is why we were disconnected and told not to study, not to read, not to pray to African gods, not to do anything that was Afrocentric. Everything we did, we had to do that was pleasing in the sight of the Europeans here in America. So we were taught maliciously and purposely, and whether or not they recognized they had this long-term agenda or not, I really don't know. But we had become so indoctrinated that it was mental suicide, spiritual suicide. And so what took place is that you have a people who no longer knew who they were. We didn't pray to our gods. We didn't respect our women. Our women didn't respect us. We didn't respect ourselves. And so we turned to drugs and alcohol. And so we learned in a system, we learned to survive in a system that says the easy way out is to sell drugs. Because we made up our minds we weren't going to get any jobs. It didn't matter to get an education. We made up all these things we conjured up in our minds growing up in our various hoods. We conjured these things up in our minds. So then we grew up hating one another. We grew up having our little gangs here, our little 4th Ward and 3rd Ward, our uptown and downtown. All along, there was no one to tell us, hey, brothers, listen here, you're going about this thing wrong. You're ruining your life and you're ruining the life of others. That's not, you have to get back your mind. You've lost your mind. And so it really disturbed me when it saddened me. I almost broke down and cried when I looked at the news and they started talking about what took place, and then I went online and I read it, and I just could not fathom young boys beating down another young brother for no reason. And even if they had a reason, my beloved, it's still wrong, so don't get me wrong, but to just simply maliciously attack a young man who's going home with books in his hand. This kid wasn't no fighter. No, he was an educator, is what he was. He was trying to be educated. He wasn't a fighter. And no, he wasn't a fighter. He wasn't involved in any games. Someone said he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, but I think it was his mother said, no, he was at the right place at the right time. He was coming from school. He was coming from school. He wasn't coming from no party, out all night drinking and drugging. No, he wasn't doing that. He wasn't away from home for several days and no one knew where he was. No, the brother was coming home from school with the books in his hand while the others were out there fighting and carrying on and running around, acting a fool. This brother was coming home from school. And what happened? These other brothers beat him and killed him. 16 years old. Now, I don't know about you, but that disturbed me. It bothers me. And it says to me that this crisis that we're dealing with, man, unless we bring it to the home front, we need to bring it to the church. We need to bring it to the school. And if the schools can't teach our children how to survive in this world by checking themselves, then we need to get our kids out of the schools. And we need to develop schools where they can be able to participate and learn how to survive. Later for all this, Ben Franklin and George Washington, Thomas Edison and all that stuff, them men never did nothing for us. They were slave owners. When they wrote the Constitution, they didn't even mean to include us in it. And when they did, we were 3/4 of a human being. How are you going to teach me about people like that? While my young children are out here in the streets killing one another as if we're some sort of demonic enemy that's out to get them. And there's some sort of satisfaction. God forbid if there's some satisfaction to just shoot another brother. I know, and we used to hear that all the time. Oh, I'll so-and-so a ninja, Yeah, I'll do this to a ninja, and I'll do that. were prideful to talk about what we do to another brother. Although we didn't say brother back then, very seldom do we still say it today. We took pride in talking about beating down somebody or abusing a sister. We took pride in these things. We didn't know any better. And the church wasn't teaching us any better. You look at our churches today, and I don't mean to pick on the churches, but that's the only institution that we have that can save us. So I'm going to deal with this with the church. We got most of our churches, except for a few, most of them who are in church are women. Most of the congregation are made up of females. We're all the men. But yet, when we go to the prison system, our men who make up 6% of the population make up over half of the population of the prison system. Our men can be, most of our young men and women are in prison, but yet but they're not in church. Why is that? They're the ones who need to be in church. Since 6% of the total population consists of African American male, but in the prison system is over half, there's something wrong there. There's something demonically wrong there. And we have to do something about this. We can't, later for talking, we need to do something about it. And when we see stuff like this, we can't afford to just let it rest. Never again should anything happen to any one of our young children in Asheville and we not rise up together as a community and storm either City Hall or whatever. We need to do it as citizens. Nobody, who cares about our kids? Who cares about our youth? We just talking and talking and talking while they keep flooding our neighborhoods with drugs and changing the laws upon us. So more of us could be put in jail. Changing the laws to 3 strikes and all this stuff and you're out and habitual criminals and all that stuff. Habitual criminals, yet you don't give them a job. You don't do anything to help. We're not talking about welfare. We're talking about a job. And this is what bothers me so much, is because with all that is going on in the system, the only solution they have for us as African Americans is incarceration. They talk about the insurance thing. The big problem about that is that those who have insurance are afraid they might have to pay insurance for some African American who doesn't want to work. It's interesting. I hear him talk all this stuff. I've been in real estate now for about 20-something years. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been cheated by those same people who are over there claiming that they don't want to work. I can't tell you the number of times I've been cheated out of a commission. How somebody went behind me. Now I'm talking about those who talk about we don't want to work and therefore they don't want to pay because anything that we can get for ourselves, they don't want to pay into insurance because it might support people who don't work. Well, heck, when you do work, they're cheating you. When you go to work every day, they're cheating you. They're holding you down. They don't want to give you a raise. You're the last hired, the first fired. I know, been there, done that. And some things certainly, let me clarify, and I stand accused of this. Some things we bring on ourselves. We bring on ourselves only because there's a cultural difference or a cultural divide. And within that cultural divide, sometimes we have a tendency, the streets that's in us, instead of dealing with situations in a more intellectual way, in a more civil way, we sort of get a little demonstrative in things that we do in our attitudes, etc. So sometimes we bring stuff on us, whether it's warranted or not is immaterial. And so I'm not simply saying that I'm the victim or we're the victim We've been victimized, that's for sure, but at the same time, we do hold responsibility for the things that we do. And those brothers who are in jail, half of those brothers, I can't tell you how many of them in there for killing another brother. For no reason, most of it for no reason. Maybe it was a drive-by, and they took the life of a brother or a sister, took his life, destroyed the life of a family, and destroyed their life. So that systemic effect from one that goes right on down to, generations perhaps. And we can't wait to get our hands on a gun. The moment you get your hand on a gun, chances are you're going to wind up in jail, and hopefully, pray to God, you don't wind up in jail after you've taken someone's life. Pray you wind up in jail because you got caught carrying a gun. Because if you don't get caught and be put in jail, eventually you're going to use that gun on somebody and take somebody's life. That's all a gun is good for. It's taking the life of others. So I got all bent out of shape over that because it's and some of the anger that I deal with, I have to deal with, and we all have to deal with some internal issues that we all have, with this anger thing, because it's important that we understand that there is a deep down in our unconsciousness. There's a lot of stuff there from not just childhood. Not just childhood, but there's a lot of stuff from before we were even born. There's a lot of stuff from the Jim Crow days. There's a lot of stuff from slavery. There's a lot of stuff from the passage when we crossed over the Atlantic. There's a lot of stuff, that's in us that has been transmitted down or transmuted to us. And by the same token, there's some other stuff in us too that comes from pharaohs and Queen Hatshepsut and the Candace's queens, Cleopatra, Queen of Ethiopia. We can go on and on and on. And there's Asar and Aset. There's the goddess Het Heru, the god Ptah. There's Songhai. There's Mali. There's the prophet Tariq, who took over and civilized Europe by way of Spain. So there's also those things that genetically pass down and that is in us. And also from the time of Lucy and Ramus, who preceded Lucy. You see, so we can't never look at history and define it as a defining moment because we keep finding new stuff. It's like I said, we thought Lucy was the oldest. Lucy was 1.2 million years old. 1.2 million, something like that. 2.1 million, I'm sorry, 2.1 million. We thought Lucy was, or maybe it was 3 million. She was 3 million. 3 million year old fossil of Lucy. We said, oh, there was nothing in Ethiopia. And then what happened? In 1994, we find a fossil of a hominid from the hominid clan, the 4 million, over 4 million, 4.1 million. And I know the name is Ramus. I can't think of the first part of that, but it was anyway, it was fossils that were found in Ethiopia again. So now they had to change history all over again. They had to reinterpret everything, you see. And this is still found in Africa. So there's Africa being the birthplace, gave forth the first civilization. And in the crevices of our minds and or our genes, this Afrocentrism continually passed down. Now in us here, because of being disconnected, a lot of that wisdom and that African understanding, the rhythm and the balance that we sought as men and women way back, understanding that balance brought peace and harmony. And when you harmonize with creation, that's why the African looked up in the stars and judged his life based on the movement of the stars and the planets. You know, when to plant, when to harvest. You see, when the water was going to rise. You see, when the cold season was, they just looked up and so they were in harmony, and they saw that as a way of harmonizing with nature. So in harmony they developed rhythm, and in the rhythm you found it in the drum. Oh, the drum, yeah, the drum. You see, and so these things that was a part of our creation in the very beginning, and consequently those things we've lost them, but they're there. They're in us. We have to tap into the seed of destiny that is within us. And when we tap into that through worshiping, our gods, through understanding our civilization, when we tap into that and we get out of all of this nonsense that has turned us against one another, that we're killing one another, when we come into contact with who we are, we would never lift a hand against one another. We would love one another because we would see harmony, we would see rhythm, we would see God. And there would be that connection. I, you, me. There was a connection. There was a community of understanding. Knowing that if I thought evil towards you, it would come back to me. As Jesus even said in the Bible, and Jesus received all of his education from Egypt. He said, as a man thinketh, so is he. If a man looketh at a woman for lust, he's committed adultery with her. So we understood these things. That's why God commanded Jesus to go into Africa. This is what the Bible tells us. That's why God commanded Moses and Joseph and all those heroes of the Bible that we talk about. But the problem is, my beloved, they learned it from our people, our civilization, and our nation. And here we are studying them and praising them and worshiping them and lifting up holy hands unto them at the expense of our own legacy. And because we've forgotten our legacy, because we've tarnished our legacy, we left those bones still standing. We need to bury them. We need by not accepting and understanding and researching and coming to know our legacy, we leave those men and women unburied. They need a proper burial, and the proper burial is to resurrect that legacy that we have. And when we resurrect that legacy, I am convinced that young boys and girls will no longer run around hating themselves because they're trying to look like and they're oppressors. I'm convinced that we as a people must come to know ourselves. Love ourselves. Respect one another. Knowing that if I send good vibes to you, good vibes come back to me. We just have to come. If we ever come together, if we come together as a people, the world will take note what we can do. Look what we've already done in spite of the fact that we are the most oppressed people on the planet. here in America. The land of riches. You have extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And most people in poverty, we know who they are. Well, when I say most people, I just say per capita. If you look at each civilization, in the various civilizations and or races, of people, per capita, we are poor by per every 10 persons as African Americans than any other race of people. Yet we are a minority. So if I say we're the most oppressed people, I'm saying it because history shows it. It's documented. They have to document these things. It's documented. Or we can go on and on and on. But brother, anytime another brother kills another brother, anytime something like that happens in our community, we need to rise up. If it was my son that took the life of another brother, like they did at that boy there who was 16 years old, I would tell the police, don't send him home. Because if you send him here, I'll kill him. I'll kill him myself. I'll save you the trouble of putting him on the on death row. I will take his life, and then I'll suffer the consequences. You can listen to Perspectives in Religion. My name is Wayne Purcell, and I leave you by saying Hotep and peace. Keep the peace.